One of the great things about the objects we make is that they live longer than we do. So they can have many different lives. In every one of their lives, in every different generation, they can acquire different meanings. So their meaning can become richer as time goes on.
Mohammad Reza Pahlavi had ruled Iran for almost 40 years.
He lived
in a world apart from his people. He was kept in power by a vicious security service and the fifth largest army on earth, equipped with American weaponry. He ignored calls for democracy. He let the nation's vast oil wealth go only to the few. He promoted Western culture, enraging millions of Muslims.
By putting his revolution to a referendum and receiving, according to official figures, 95% of the vote, the Shah was able to claim that the people endorsed his vision of modernization. But it wasn't just the masses who backed the Shah. Western-educated liberals were also swept along by his modernizing zeal.
He would say, you want to make a revolution? I am going to make that revolution because you are not capable of performing it. So I'll do it. And I am going to go very fast, very quick, and you have to run to catch me. That's why most of our generation believed in him.
Like his father, the Shah encountered the most stubborn resistance from the Shiite clergy. And, like his father, the Shah dismissed these criticisms as the reactionary views of a medieval mindset.
If you are unhappy that your country makes progress, if you are unhappy that your country is saying goodbye to a feudalistic system, if you are unhappy that half of the population of your country, the women, are emancipated, well, this I cannot help.
The sharpest attacks on the Shah came from an obscure priest based in the holy city of Qom. Ruhollah Khomeini preached against the Shah's reforms, claiming that the emancipation of women was against Islamic law, and accusing the Shah of being a puppet of foreign powers. In June of 1963, Khomeini was arrested and serious rioting broke out in Tehran and in other parts of the country. The Shah hesitated. Unwilling to stain his white revolution with blood, he refused to call out the army. His prime minister had to take the responsibility. The army went into action and several hundred people died.
The problem with the Shah really is that he didn't have the ability to be ruthless when he had to be ruthless. When he needed to exercise power to preserve his throne, he really couldn't do it.
Order was restored, and Khomeini was exiled to Najaf, a Shiite holy city in neighboring Iraq, where he continued to preach against the Shah.
He thought that he has reached the peak of his power. He had become the most successful of Iranian kings for several centuries. The economy was going very well. Iran's prestige was high throughout the world. So he thought that he has arrived. And this was, in fact, the beginning of the fall.
The Shah's fall began among the ruins of Persepolis, the seat of Persia's ancient Achaemenid kings, Darius and Xerxes. Iranian scholars close to the Shah suggested that the 2500th anniversary of the Achaemenid Empire be marked in some way. The idea had great appeal for the Shah. He could draw the world's attention to his own achievements and assert his own legitimacy by linking the Pahlavi regime with Iran's most ancient royal house. but most of all the idea appealed to the Shah's mystic side. He felt a bond between himself and the first Achaemenid king, Cyrus the Great, whose simple tomb was at Pasargad near to Persepolis. The celebrations began on the 15th of October, 1971. In a voice charged with emotion, the Shah addressed the spirit of the long-dead king.
شاهنشاه ایران و از جانب ملت من.
O Cyrus, great king, king of kings, Achaemenian king, king of the land of Iran, I, the Shah of Iran, offer thee salutations from myself and from my nation.
For him, this moment was the essence of what he called the great civilization.
He wanted to go into history as a new Cyrus. The great civilization for him was a combination of Cyrus the Great and of economic and social development.
After honoring the memory of Cyrus, the Shah was joined by 50 heads of state for the main event. A parade of Iranian armies through the ages, which out-DeMilled Cecil B. DeMille. But there was one group excluded from the events at Persepolis, the Iranian people. Because of security concerns and the inaccessibility of the site, most Iranians had to watch this patriotic pageant on television. Far from inspiring them with royalist fervor, it left many feeling baffled and insulted.
Everything was ripe to start a real democratization of the society. And instead of that, he wanted to make a show of himself. And this is where a parting between him and the people starts.
He felt bonded to and at one with Cyrus, the ancient Achaemenid monarchy, the whole grand history of Iran, and its cultural achievements. But this was some kind of mystical association which the Iranian people weren't plugged into. They didn't know what he was doing.
The Shah's guests were ferried around in luxury coaches, unaware of the security measures surrounding the event. Fearful of terrorism or merely protest, Savak had rounded up thousands of people, loosely defined as troublemakers.
Because of the security, because we have to look after every heads of states or representative of that country, the security arrested a lot of people. They put them in prison. And I went to His Majesty. I said, they have arrested a lot of people who are innocent.
Persepolis had focused the attention of the world on Iran, but not in the way the Shah had hoped. After the event, human rights groups were flooded with lists of prisoners' names. They began to investigate and publicize claims of the detention, torture, and execution of political prisoners in Iran.
خدمت شما عرض بکنم که در اون سالها زندان یه چیز وحشتناکی بود. من یه چیزی میگم شما یه چیزی میشنوید. اصلا طرز برخوردشون، صحبتشون خیلی با ما وحشیانه و سخت بود. یکی دو بار انسان رو مثلا با پا 6 ساعت آویزون میکردن، 2 ساعت آویزون میکردن که اصلا انسان فکر میکرد که همه دنیا الان داره مغزش رو متلاشی میکنه.
An international campaign began which was to blacken the Shah's reputation. The Shah was baffled by the attacks, for at the same time as some in the West portrayed him as an oppressive dictator, Western leaders were urging him to spend billions to become the policeman of the Gulf. The Shah could never understand how he could be the object of both bitter vilification and sycophantic praise.
For 30 years, the Shah had stood shoulder to shoulder with American presidents against the spread of communism and anti-Western movements in the Middle East.
Iran, because of the great leadership of the Shah, is an island of stability in one of the more troubled areas of the world.
گفتم ساکت موندن و ایشون گفتم به هر حال من دیگه از این مسائل خسته شدم.
لایک گروه‌های سیاسی زیادی بودن، باز هم در امام به عنوان چهره مبارز، یک رهبر مبارز نیرومند که همه مردم تونسته دور خودش بسیج کرده، شخصیتی می‌دیدن که میتونن در حمایت از او قام بردارن برای آزادی کشورشون.
The Shah's government banned public gatherings. During one rally in Tehran, troops shot more than 100 demonstrators dead.
ولی منتظر بودیم که پیام امام بیاد.
The King of Kings went on TV and embraced the revolutionaries.
انقلاب ملت ایران نمیتواند مورد تایید من به عنوان پادشاه ایران و به عنوان یک فرد ایرانی نباشد. تضمین میکنم که حکومت ایران در آینده بر اساس قانون اساسی، عدالت اجتماعی و اراده ملی و بدور از استبداد و ظلم و فساد خواهد بود.
This man changed the world. He took Iran and made it an inspiration for a new, uncompromising strand of Islam. As he came down the steps, Khomeini brought 2,500 years of monarchy in Iran to an end.